So I remember when I was about 10 back in the Netherlands, my family home was like a traditional layout. It didn't make sense that the dining table was where we are because the sun was setting at the opposite side of the room. So I was like, why do we have dinner while the sun sets at the other side of the room? So let's flip the room around. And actually, I think my mom lives in that space till I was maybe 45. And she kept that configuration all that time. Hi, I'm Arjan. I'm an interior designer and principal designer for Aiden.T. I've been doing residential interior design for maybe about 15 years. I've been trained as a commercial interior designer. So I've been in the business for about 25 to 30 years. So ever since I was young, I've been interested in interior design. So when I was in the Netherlands, when we would visit like a palace or a cathedral or a church, I always was fascinated how the space made us feel differently. You walk into a church or a cathedral and then you start to talk softer, and I don't know, there's something changes inside your body almost. And it's not only the grandeur of the space, but also like the whole atmosphere. When you design a house, I think the first thing you look at is how people will use the space, but you also look at what's the inspiration for the story you want to tell. I think as an interior designer, you're more of a storyteller and a director. So you would always start off with the inspiration. So that can come from a lot of different things. Sometimes the homeowner will give us a cue, could be their favorite holiday destination or a place that they really like to visit. And then from there, we try to dissect a little bit more what are the elements that make the design. First question I would ask a homeowner is like, how do you want to feel when you walk through the door? Because interior design, I think, plays a lot with your emotions and how you feel and perceive the space. Understanding how the person wants to feel, they want to be energized, they want to be relaxed, and what it is that makes them feel that way. That then will decide how the design will come together. I think to create a space that impacts how they live and experience the house that they live in. An example on how we would change how people work with the space. Let's say people like to read or wind down in a quiet place. Instead of having a bedroom, we could convert it into a library, a space surrounded by books. So we kind of make the spaces work together with their lifestyle. So my process for interior design, we normally start to have a conversation with the homeowners. So the initial conversation should not be about, oh, the TV is going to be here and the shoe cabinet is going to be there. I think the initial conversation should be about the aspirations for the space, the aspirations of your life. What do you want out of your space and how do you want to feel when you're in that space? We then study a little bit deeper into what are the elements that make up that overall style. So we reference historical elements or wherever we are referencing it from a design perspective. So we deconstruct that whole design philosophy and then we add on a color board. So we kind of then put them together as an overall scheme. So after we have deconstructed the overall style that we're going for and the color board, we look at the floor plan. Floor plan, we start to look at how we need to change the space. Do we need to remove wall structural changes? And then we start to build up the space again using all the elements that we kind of from our design inspiration and the colors. So once I gather all that information, like magic, it kind of like the place comes to life in my head. It's just like I can see how everything kind of flows together. What kind of details we should have, what kind of finishings it should be. And then it's actually then quite easy to transfer that into an overall design scheme because you kind of like then have to break it down so that the homeowner kind of understands what you want to do. I think the most important aspect of a design and also the longevity of a design is layering. I think design should have always elements of surprise. So when you look at this space, for instance, there's a lot of layering that I added onto the space. So when you first walk in, you probably will see the furniture, the focal points, maybe the ceiling that we've done. But then, I added little details around the windows. Even when you come in a second time or a third time, so different occasions, there will always be little things that the room reveals. Interesting elements that you will discover, things that you might not have noticed before. And I think that makes good design, and it also makes interesting design as well. So that gives the longevity to a space. So I think the most important thing creating a home is to bring in elements that you have a connection with, something that is personal, something that can come through family. It could be an heirloom piece or something that you really like. It could be an artist, it could be materials that you really resonate with, that you want to use. By introducing these things into your space, you also show your personality but you also make it home, and you have that connection to the space. So in my personal life, I drink tea out of cups that came from my great-grandmother. And even this, it's like an office space. But I have plates that my mom sourced on the wall, and I have things from my grandmother that kind of comes in. So there's always these little personal touches. Home should always be slightly quirky. There should always be a few pieces that are maybe a little bit off, or you think of, hey, why is this there? And that sometimes starts a conversation as well. So people are like, that's an interesting choice why you have, let's say, the plates that I have. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then I can share, okay, I sent my mom out to source the plates, and or this comes from through the family. That kind of connection, I think, is what people resonate with as well. And it kind of like makes the design a bit more interesting, and it also makes the space more you're reflecting yourself. So in some cases, like I had homeowners that say, oh, maybe we can go to my mom's place and then rummage through the cabinets to kind of like select pieces that are meaningful to them, like pottery or plates or artwork. Sometimes even go into their parents' place, pull pieces from that space, and then introduce it into their new home. Sometimes even we design around it. Like I had a client, the mother had a very nice collection of Peranakan wares, and the home wasn't necessarily Peranakan inspired, but just a curated kind of display of all the ceramics that we kind of introduced in a slightly more contemporary setting. It looked actually contemporary, but because the pieces itself were kind of meaningful, it really made a very nice statement into the house. The Singapore design scene seems to always be like 5 years behind what the rest of the world is doing. I think it's partly because supply and demand. By the time things are becoming really popular, only then suppliers are bringing in certain materials. So I remember when maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I like to do these wood fluted walls that are very popular at the moment. There was no supplier for that, so the carpenter had to really make the panels themselves, stick it on the wall. We really had to figure out how to create these things, like how it works with the materials that we have, that it works in our climate. So by the time we figured it out, working with the contractors or the carpenters to really make it work, then only it starts to get traction, because people obviously start to see it on Instagram and Pinterest, and then the demand gets a bit higher. So I think Singaporeans in general are very visual people, so they always like to see a picture of the end result. That's why you see a lot of places having a similar kind of a look, very cookie cutter, because very visual and very easy in a way to design, because you just see a picture and say, okay, this is what I want and this is what we do. Whereas I tend to create a scheme looking at different materials, trying to tell a story through the design schemes that we are planning. Although we do sketches and we do artist impressions, the scheme might not be fully there when we start the process itself. But as an interior designer, sometimes we are crafting spaces out of mood boards and materials, etc. So go onto this design journey without necessarily knowing where it ends up, because it's something that's in my head, which we try to communicate as much as possible. There's a little bit of trust needed from a homeowner to go into that whole process.